Well, boys, we're back. My daughter was just recently born, but now we back. And back just in time for double Nightfall rewards this week for arguably the best Grandmaster Nightfall to grind for. On top of that, the sidearm Buzzard is dropping. And considering all the exotics that we recently touched on that are going to be performing so well in Season 21 Sandbox, honestly, guys, this is the best week to grind. We're talking double weapon drops, double adept ciphers, double the ascendant shards, and other materials. It's also going to be raining exotics. I know many of you have already redeemed Grandmaster carries over on our Twitch, and yes, we will be fulfilling those all week long. Now, before we dive into specifically why the Buzzard is looking so juicy, we need to talk about the Glassway strike. This was once one of the toughest strikes in the game, but considering all the power creep we have had over the years, this is an easy strike to optimize if you have the right setup. First up, let's talk about these surges that are active for this week. You have Solar and Strand Surge. This, of course, gives any weapon or ability that is Solar or Strand based a 25% increase to outgoing damage. So weapons like Polaris Lance, Taraxipus, which is the scout rifle that's dropping. And for some reason, YouTube demonetized us for calling it Taraxipus. I guess because we said puss? What the hell, YouTube? Tiku's Divination, Ariana's Vow, Rufus Fury, etc. All these things are going to be benefiting this week from the active surge. Now, the Overcharge Weapon modifier is going to be active as well. This is going to be for grenade launchers. And considering how much damage Fighting Lion is doing against red bar enemies, which is applicable here to a number of red bar enemies in this Nightfall, Wyverns included, yes, Fighting Lion may be an option for you. By the way, any weapon affected by champion artifact perks gets a 25% increase in damage across the board. So keep that in mind as well. So as long as you have anti-barrier pulse, anti-barrier sidearm, overload bow, or overload auto SMG selected in your artifact, the corresponding weapon will get that 25% damage buff. Now, there's also the Origin Hones artifact perk, which makes weapons with noble deeds, nano tracing rockets, text balance stock, and ambush origin traits overcharge when the modifier is active, which is really a ton of weapons. But even things like Retrofit Escapade, which I know is a void machine gun, but you can take advantage of things like bricks from beyond, volatile, and still get that 25% damage bonus despite not matching the surge. And that's because of that overcharge. Now, it's also important to note that surge modifiers and overcharge modifiers do not stack, which means you can't use, say, something like explosive personality and get the grenade launcher surge and then stack that with the 25% increase in damage from solar surge. The solar surge and the grenade launcher surge does not stack together. You just get one. Now, consequently, the threat for this week will be void, meaning that you'll take 25% increased damage from all void sources, which is a lot, especially the boss, and definitely wyverns, who will mess you up. Like, don't kid yourself. I know I'm talking about this GM as if it's the easiest Grandmaster in the game. No, it can still mess you up. So you definitely want to rock things like void resist mods on your chest piece to help mitigate some of that damage. You're roughly looking at 15% resistance with just one mod and 25 resistance with two. Now, let's talk about the shields that you're going to encounter in this Grandmaster. Although match game is not nearly as punishing as it once was, it's still good to be prepared. Glassway has two shield types that you're going to encounter on your enemies, Arc and Solar. Now, considering the change that Bungie made when it came to match game with the launch of Lightfall, it's really not that hard to counter, especially when you're considering your weapons that have Surge and Overcharge. You can still chew through those shields. But having at least one person rocking Arc and another on your fire team having something Solar is still very helpful. Now, let's talk about champions. The champs you're going to be facing in this Nightfall are both Overload and Barrier champions, which includes Overload Minotaurs and Fallen Captains, and those really annoying Barrier servitors, as well as Hobgoblins. Now, there are a number of ways you can deal with the champions, especially now post Lightfall. You've got Arc Jolt, Stasis Slow, Void Suppression, or any weapon affected by our Overload artifact perks, or even intrinsic traits that are found on Luminarch and Divinity. At one time, I used to rock Divinity in this Nightfall a bunch, and it does help, especially if you're picking up Overload champions from afar, especially when they spawn in. You can immediately just take one out on the far left side there in the boss room. Now, for this season, we have Overload Auto and SMG, as well as Overload Bow. Now, what this really means is this makes weapons like Striga, as well as TQ Divination, great options here. For Barrier champions, you can actually stun them with Solar Radiant effects, Unraveling rounds, Volatile Weapon rounds, and of course, intrinsic anti-barrier or weapons affected by artifact perks, which this season is Anti-Barrier Pulse Rifle and Piercing Sidearms. Cross, does this mean I can bring Forerunner? I know we just reviewed it, and believe me, I wish you could. And you could, but not my first choice, especially considering how damn good Striga actually is. Now, for me, the king of all champion stunning this season has really just been Suspension. I have been rocking this build all season long, and so many people assumed that this was not going to be a good exotic. Abeyant Leap, guys, is so nasty. This has been my go-to build. Even even in this Nightfall, literally suspending an entire lane full of enemies. Now, you still need to go for the stun on Overload champions, but for barriers, it suspends them, puts them up in the air. For wyverns, it also suspends them and exposes their crit spot. So I'm a big fan of Abeyant Leap here and this build, and a link to that will be down below. Now, some other builds before we get into the nitty-gritty of this guide that I want to bring up. These are nasty for Grandmasters. We have our infinite damage Broodweaver build for Warlocks. It combines Strand with Necrotic Grips and Osteostriga with fantastic interactions. And then when you combine things with Vorpal, you can get the infinite damage glitch, which allows you to tack on damage to the boss and literally just walk away. Essentially, how this works is you fire enough damage to get the tick damage going, and then swap over to a weapon that has Vorpal. And so long as you have that weapon with Vorpal equipped and in your hand, the damage will continue until either the enemy is defeated or if the enemy goes into immunity phase. Now, we also have our Titan Polaris build, which leans into the Solar Surge, and on top of that, it scales ignition damage with, of course, Path of Burning Steps. It's very nice. Add that to the Firebolt spam that you can do with the artifact mods. You'll be popping ignitions all over the place. Now, let's get into how to conquer this Grandmaster with ease. Progressing into the Nightfall, the first group of ads that you encounter will coincidentally also have your first champion to take out. This is an Overload champion. Simultaneously, there's a number of Fallen Shanks, a couple Marauders. Clear them out, fellas, and continue progressing forward. Now, in the next room, you're actually going to clear out both an Overload Captain and a Barrier Servitor. Now, if you're quick enough, you can actually burn the Overload Captain before the Barrier Servitor even fully spawns. Otherwise, you're going to have to deal with the Barrier Servitor first, as he can give immunity there to all the ads there in the room. Again, suspending everything is just so easy. Now, in the next room, you have to face off against a mini-boss named Warrior's Enforcer, as well as a number of Vandal Snipers and an Overload Captain. Now, I highly recommend that you stay to the front of the room and engage at a distance here. Granted, you can get hit by the stasis. If you start to see them popping up on the ground around you, make sure you back off, but use your cover here to your advantage. And clear whatever you want to first. Some people like to take out the Overload champion immediately. Sometimes you want to save them. There's also a Barrier champion that spawns in this room. Honestly, with the right builds, especially if it's like AoE related, you'll just be killing everything that spawns. I will say this, for my folks out there that like to use stasis, a long time ago, I used to use nothing but Stacy turrets with Omnioculus. We also made a build called Stacy's Curves, which is really, really good, but essentially you just freeze everything in the room. That's a really easy way of progressing through this Nightfall. Not the fastest, because again, I feel like suspending everything is just so much faster and so many other lethal builds. But if you are playing like with an LFG squad, rocking double Stacy turrets is just an easy way of just controlling this Nightfall. Now, the next room, you want to use the large pillar near the entrance as that break between you and the onslaught of ads that are coming in. Tether is actually fantastic here, and if you have a Well of Radiance, definitely pop it to keep your team alive. Again, I kind of play aggressively. I move up, I pop my barricade, I suspend everything. It's GG, man. Now, you want to focus down the Technocrat's assistant and the Barrier Servitor once it spawns. Now, moving on to the next area, you have a few ads here and there, and then you'll be met with these skewed platforms. We actually like to go right here, but it really doesn't matter. You do have an Overload champion that likes to hang around this right side, and he will drop down. And then across these platforms will be yet another Overload champion. The only issue here in this entire section is there are snipers that post up. So if you get too carried away with the champ, those snipers will eat you, even with max resilience, of which we still highly recommend that you use. Now, in the next area, there will be a plate that you actually have to drain the Radiant Lorien fluid out of. What I see so many times in this area is immediately, once the capping phase starts, whoever my Warlock is that's dropping a well, immediately puts it down. You don't want to do that, guys. Save your load. Wait for the opportune moment to blow it, which is approximately 50% of this plate. At 50%, drop your Well of Radiance, and you're good. And back in the day, we used to not even be able to stand on this plate, but you can stand on it and still tank everything if you don't drop that well too soon. Save it. Wait till you get to 50% when the onslaught of ads really start to pour in, and then drop it. That way it can carry you for the other 50%. Now, eventually, the trench will be drained fully, and down below, you'll see an Overload champion spawns, as well as a number of ads. Deal with that guy. There's also going to be a heavy shank at the left side, as well as a Barrier Servitor. Really, really annoying with the Servitor. Sometimes the Servitor will actually like fall down in the trench area, and then like spawn back up and then fall back down. Just try to poop on them as quickly as you can. Outside of that, having a good bow or some sort of weapon that does damage from afar is really nice in this area, considering how many Vandals you have posted up all over the place that are sniping your face off. So whether you're rocking Luminarch, Strident Whistle, longsword under your skin, Tiku's divination, or pretty much any other bow. I really like how bows perform here in dealing with those enemies from afar. Now moving on to the boss room. Before the boss engagement actually begins, you'll be met with an Overload Captain and a few Drex. But deal with those guys and then the Vex Gate will power up, and this is where the real fight begins. This is pretty much where the strike all takes place and where you can really optimize things to speed everything up. Now we actually run to the left side, and we normally like to pick up the Overload champion that spawns in, just so he can't sneak us, right? That eliminates one champion, and then we kind of run back to the middle where the Vex Hydra is, and then we just focus that area. And the idea here is just to pull all these enemies to that middle area, create a choke point. This is fantastic if you have anything that does AoE. I'm suspending everything pretty much in this entire lane, and when you do enough damage to this Vex Hydra, it does despawn. Deal with the champions, and then you'll have to do some damage to the boss. Now, there's a couple ways you can deal with the boss. One of the easiest way to apply damage over time to the boss without exposing yourself is really Witherhoard. Pop a single Witherhoard shot on him. You could sit inside of an Empowering Rift. You'll be doing more damage, and it does damage over time, and you just have to hit the shield. The other way is to take advantage of the Osteovorpal bug, which does infinite damage, although not as much damage over time. So again, not the most optimal way of shredding this boss down. But if you have one person on your team rocking Witherhoard and then someone else rocking Osteostriga with a Vorpal weapon, you can all simultaneously be doing damage over time, which can shred this boss very quickly. Now, upon reaching 2/3 of its health, the next phase will open up, and it's pretty much going to be the same, except on the left side, instead of an Overload champion, you'll be met with Wyverns. And Wyverns are by far the most annoying thing here. Try to kill the Wyvern on the left if you can, although exposing the crit point on those Wyverns is kind of annoying, even from afar. Again, that's why I love Suspend here, guys. Just throws them up in the air. Keep in mind, Wyverns are red bars, and Fighting Lion's doing a crazy amount of damage to red bar enemies, which means they should be piecing these Wyverns up pretty good. Now again, we like to deal with that Wyvern on the left and then proceed to push back to the middle, consolidate all the adds there, also bring in that Hydra there to the middle, but be very careful because this is that moment where Wyvern can spawn up on the left, and honestly, you want to stay kind of to the left of the doorway and drag that Wyvern over. It's not a matter of will the Wyvern try to sneak you from the left, but when will the Wyvern try to sneak me? That's really it. And sometimes they sneak you from the right. This is why we haven't said anything about using your supers. You really want to save it for that moment where the Wyverns start to pour in. Now, if you do too much damage to the Vex mini boss here, this yellow bar right here in the middle, this will actually cause the boss to bounce, and then Overload champions will spawn in. Granted, if you're trying to optimize things, then literally don't hold back, poop on everything as fast as you can. But ideally, you kind of want to chill a little bit. Don't send that mini boss back. Deal with the Wyverns, deal with the adds, and then deal with the mini boss. Personally, I like to just deal with everything that comes to me first, but upon dealing with all those, then the boss will spawn again. And it's at this point that Overload champions will also spawn. Again, guys, I like to go to the left side, burn the one that immediately comes out that Vex Gate, and then move back to the middle and consolidate all the enemies. Rinse and repeat here, fellas. You'll also get another wave of Wyverns, but kill them, kill the mini boss. And then the other question that I have asked all the time, are the barrier champions required to be killed in order to get platinum? Now, back in the day, you were not required to get the kill on the barrier champions. You just had to do damage to them. Matter of fact, I would throw a Stacy turret out there, it would do damage, and then we would just kill the boss. And lo and behold, we would get platinum rewards. However, at least from my experience here recently, you pretty much have to get the kill on all those barrier champions. So you have to clear everything. So keep that in mind, guys. I know I've had previous guides saying, hey, just touch him up a little bit, do some damage, and then shred the boss. You'll still get platinum. That does not seem to be the case now. And if it is the case, it is very inconsistent. Way more inconsistent than what it used to be. Like back in the day, we just had to breathe on those barrier champions, and boom, after killing the boss, we had platinum. So guys, that is your guide for Glassway this week. We'll be doing these runs with everybody. If you redeem to carry with us, come over to our Twitch. I do want to touch up real quick on Buzzard because people are saying it is the best sidearm in the game. I know, sounds wild, but that's what everyone's saying. And the Adept version is only going to be nastier. But Buzzard does have a lot of good juice on it. Rangefinder, Perpetual Motion, Frenzy, Vorpal, 4 times the Charm, Kinetic Tremors, which is really what I want the most, especially like Kinetic Tremors, 4 times the Charm. It's also got Stunning Recovery, and considering we have Anti-Barrier Sidearm this season, that would work perfectly here. But for PvP, I do want that max range Perpetual Rangefinder roll and really see how it performs. It's got a 3.9 rating for Crucible, but I have heard people talk very, very highly about the sidearm. I mean, people are saying it's better than Drang, it's better than Traveler's Chosen, it troops on empirical evidence, forgiveness. I don't know. We'll see. I have not actually used it myself, but believe me, I'm intrigued. As soon as we get this roll, we will be testing it because I want to see if it actually is the best sidearm in the game or if this is just a bunch of hype. Well, guys, let me know in the comments below what you think. If you have any builds that you would like to recommend for this Nightfall, feel free to recommend them. Again, my favorite builds though are Abeyant Leap build, our Aztecross build, really good. Of course, Star Class for my well users. Stacy's really good. Having a silent tether on your team. There's so many ways you can do this Nightfall. But I will say, guys, you do want to do this Nightfall. We have so many exotics, especially our roaming super related exotics that are going to be so much better next season. Feel free to check out any of those videos if you're curious to know which exotics to be looking for. We've got our Warlock video we're still putting together, but that will be out this week as well. Well, fellas and ladies, thank you all for coming and watching. And as always,
slap that like button like your mama told you right.